Have you ever stepped outside in the early morning and noticed butterflies moving through your yard, almost like they already knew exactly where to go? It doesn't really feel random. In fact, there's something almost intentional about it. And when it keeps happening, you start to wonder, why your home, why your garden, and not the ones next door? Most people don't really think about it that way. Butterflies just feel like part of the background of a nice day outside. But the truth is, they're not just showing up anywhere. They're responding to something in your environment that most of us never really pay attention to. And once you notice it, even in a small way, your yard starts to feel different, like there's more going on there than you first realized. The first thing to understand here is actually pretty simple, but it tends to surprise people. Butterflies aren't just drifting through your yard by accident. What you're seeing is a response to real, physical signals in the environment. Things like scent moving through the air, colors that stand out against the background, or even warm patches of sunlight hitting a flower bed at just the right angle. To us, a garden might just feel calm or look nice from a distance. But for a butterfly, it's more like a living map. Every corner gives off a different clue: where to land, where to feed, where to pause for a moment before moving on. And they're constantly reading those signals as they move. Once you start thinking about it that way, a quiet backyard doesn't feel so random anymore, because what looks ordinary to us might actually be full of meaning in ways we never really notice. Now here's where it gets a little more interesting. Butterflies aren't just drawn to a yard because it looks beautiful to us. They're not really thinking in terms of beauty at all. What they're actually looking for is survival. And that changes everything. There are two things that matter most to them. First, nectar. That's the energy source that keeps them flying from place to place, especially during warm days when they're constantly moving. Without it, they simply can't stay long. And second, something most people don't think about at all: specific plants where they can lay eggs. Plants that support the next generation, not just the adults you happen to see. When both of these things are present, a yard becomes useful to them in a very real way. But when they're missing, even the most colorful garden doesn't mean much. That's why you might notice butterflies gathering around certain homes while completely ignoring others just a short walk away. It's not about preference like we usually think of it. It's about what they need to survive. And once you see it through that lens, their behavior starts to make a lot more sense. Almost like you're finally reading a pattern that was always there, just hidden in plain sight. There's another detail that most people tend to overlook. Butterflies depend a lot on warmth in their environment. They're cold-blooded, which means they can't regulate their own body temperature the way we do. They rely on the sun just to get moving properly. That's why you often notice them in the quieter parts of a yard, open corners, where the morning light stays a little longer, or spots where the wind doesn't push them around too much. Even small things can shape that space. A fence, a garden wall, or just a simple patch of grass can create the kind of microenvironment they naturally prefer. So it's not only about flowers or color. It's also about how your space holds light throughout the day, where warmth gathers and where it fades. And that's the interesting part, because you don't really measure it with tools or numbers. You feel it when you step outside, even without thinking about it. And butterflies seem to feel it too. This is the part that surprises a lot of people. A yard doesn't just sit there quietly in the background of daily life. It's actually sending out signals all the time, even if we're not aware of it. Small things make a difference. Whether chemicals are used on the grass, whether native flowers are planted, or whether parts of the yard are left a little wild instead of being trimmed into perfect order. To butterflies, all of that tells a story. A space that's heavy with chemicals can feel unsafe to them, almost like something to avoid. But a yard with variety, with a mix of plants and a bit of natural growth, feels more open, more usable, and over time, they start to recognize it. That's why you sometimes see butterflies coming back to the same homes again and again, even across different seasons. It's not really about choice in the way we think of it. It's more about consistency. The environment keeps sending the same message over and over, and that message is simple. This place works. When you think about your own yard, have you ever noticed something like that happening, even in small ways? Butterflies don't actually live very long, but their story doesn't really end with one generation. So when you notice them coming back to the same yard year after year, it's often not the exact same butterflies you saw before. It's something a bit more interesting than that. Each generation seems to follow patterns left behind by the ones before it. A place that once provided food, shelter, and safety tends to get used again, almost like the memory of that place carries forward in nature itself. And when you think about it, that idea is pretty powerful, because it means your garden isn't just something decorative sitting outside your home. It's part of a living system that, in a way, remembers what works and quietly returns to it over time. Sometimes I think we don't really notice how much is happening just outside our doors. We walk past our yards every day, maybe glance at them for a second, and move on. But they're actually part of something much larger, something that's constantly interacting with sunlight, wind, insects, and the slow rhythm of time. Butterflies are only a small piece of that picture, but in a way, they make it easier to see. Because when they show up, they don't feel random. They feel almost delicate, almost intentional, like they're responding to something we can't quite see. And that brings up a simple question. Maybe it's not really about why butterflies visit some homes more than others. Maybe it's about what kind of environment we're creating without even realizing it. A small change in plants, light, or even how we take care of a space can shift what nature decides to do with it. And if you've ever had butterflies in your yard, even just once in a while, you might have paused for a second and wondered what actually brought them there. I don't think it's magic, but I also don't think it's random either. It feels like something in between, something quiet, something natural, something we're still learning how to really notice when we slow down enough to look.